All right, welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a story today, something I know a lot of you have been following. Kind of a head scratcher, where religion and politics, they get a little tangled. We're talking about St. Sabina Church in Chicago. They decided to fly the American flag upside down.
Yeah, it definitely grabs your attention, right? Gets people talking. There's a whole lot of history and symbolism tied up in a move like that.
Yeah, it's not something you see every day.
I mean, think about it. That upside down flag, it's a distress signal, universally recognized. Like, hey, something's seriously wrong here.
Yeah, like a ship in trouble, sending out an SOS.
Exactly. And in this case, you've got St. Sabina, led by Father Michael Pfleger. They're essentially saying America's in a state of emergency.
So they're not just, making a symbolic statement. This is tied to real-world concerns.
Oh, absolutely. Father Pfleger, he's known for his activism. They're calling out what they see as dangerous policies from the Trump administration.
Okay, so let's break this out a bit. What are the specific issues they're protesting?
They list a number of things, specifically the firing of all those federal employees, you remember that, and then the threat of these ICE raids that could really impact immigrant communities. They're painting a picture of, well, a country in turmoil.
A country that's lost its way, they'd probably say. And Father Pfleger, to really hammer that home, he said, quote, "This is not normal, this is not acceptable, and we will rise up and we will resist."
Strong words. Powerful statement.
Definitely. And it's really interesting how this whole thing, flying the flag upside down, it's become such a divisive issue. Even among veterans, you'd think, they might be unified on something like this, but
Right, you'd think so. But there are some veterans, like Rochelle Crump, she's fully on board with the protest. She said, and I'm quoting here, "For many years we have held it as a sacred piece of what it meant to America. But today we are here because America is under distress." So for her, the situation, the distress, justifies the action.
yeah, it's like the flag represents America and America's in trouble, so the flag reflects that.
That's how she sees it, yeah. But then you have other veterans who are deeply offended by the whole thing. Like, any alteration of the flag, even as a protest, it's disrespectful to those who served, who died for this country.
I saw one quote that just said, "People died for this flag." Really gets to the heart of their argument.
Yeah, no messing around. It raises a tough question, though, right? Where does patriotism lie? Blindly supporting the symbol or speaking out when you think the country's going down the wrong path?
It's like two very different ideas of what it means to be patriotic are clashing.
Absolutely, and both sides feel very strongly that they're in the right. And to make things even more complicated, you've got this other veteran, Esteban Burgoa. He suggested Father Pfleger should be, praying for the Pope, who was pretty sick at the time, instead of getting involved in politics.
Oh, wow. Adding another layer to this.
Right, like prayer and protest can't exist together. But Father Pfleger didn't back down. He shot back, saying his activism is a form of prayer, even quoted scripture.
Really? What did he say?
He said, "I shouldn't be getting involved. What Bible do you read?" The Bible I read was that Jesus, who started his first sermon, saying, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, anointed me to bring good news to the poor."
He's basically saying caring for others, fighting for justice, that's what his faith is all about.
Exactly. He's invoking this idea of prophetic witness, which has a long history in many religions. It means people of faith have a duty to call out injustice, even if it makes people uncomfortable.
So it's not just about the flag then. It's a bigger question about what the church should be doing, what it should be involved in. Should it stick to spiritual matters? Or does it have a responsibility to get involved with social and political issues?
And it's a debate that's been raging for centuries. This whole thing at St. Sabina, it brings it right to the forefront. And, it's not an isolated incident. We saw something similar happen at Yosemite National Park.
Oh, right, with the Park Service employees?
Yeah, they flew the flag upside down, too, to protest budget cuts that were affecting their work.
So this sense of frustration of things being broken, it's not just in one community or one group, is it? It's a lot bigger than that.
It really does seem that way. And people are using this powerful symbol, the upside-down flag, as a way to say, hey, pay attention, something's wrong. And with Father Pfleger, well, he's made it clear he's not backing down. He's going to keep that flag upside down until, in his words, normalcy returns.
Normalcy. What does that even mean anymore? It's such a tricky word.
It really is. And to add another twist, the Archdiocese of Chicago, they've declined to comment on the whole situation.
So we're left wondering, what's their stance? Do they agree with Father Pfleger? Disagree? Or are they just trying to stay out of it?
Strategic silence can be pretty loud, don't you think? It shows that tension that can exist between a local church and the larger institution.
Yeah, it's like, how much freedom does a local church really have to take a stand? And how far are they willing to push things? Lots to think about.
Lots to think about. We've covered a lot already, haven't we? Symbolism, patriotism, the role of the church, this feeling of discontent across the country. And then there's that word normalcy hanging over it all.
And we're just getting started. We've got a lot more to unpack here, so stay with us. It really is amazing, How this one thing, this upside down flag, has gotten so many people riled up. And not just the veterans we were talking about, it goes even deeper than that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It brings up this really basic question. What does it actually mean to be patriotic?
Yeah, what does that word even mean?
Right. Like, for some folks, and I'm thinking about those veterans who are against the protest, it seems like patriotism is all about respecting symbols and authority, the traditional stuff.
So, like, showing your loyalty but not questioning anything, reverence for the flag no matter what.
That seems to be the gist, yeah. But then you've got folks like Father Pfleger and those who support him, and for them, patriotism seems to be more about, well, holding the country accountable to its own ideals, even if that means, making some people uncomfortable.
Challenging those in power.
Exactly.
So it's like they're saying, hey, we love this country enough to risk offending some people because we think it's going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And it's interesting, right, because both sides are using the idea of patriotism to defend their positions.
That's so wild. It's like patriotism is whatever you want it to be.
Well, it shows how these big concepts, these powerful words, they can be interpreted in so many different ways, depending on, your own background, your
Your
beliefs.
worldview, yeah. And it makes me think about the history of this kind of thing, like using the flag or disrespecting the flag as a form of protest. This isn't the first time this has happened, is it?
Oh, no, not at all. This goes way back in American history. I mean, think about the Vietnam War. Back then, you had people burning the flag as a way to protest the war. That was huge.
Yeah, super controversial. It's just like this upside down flag is now. So what happened with that? Did the courts get involved?
They did. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. And in 1989, in the case of Texas v. Johnson, they ruled that burning the flag is actually protected speech under the First Amendment.
Wow, so even though a lot of people found it really offensive, the court said basically, tough luck, the government can't tell you how to express your political views.
That's right, even if those views are critical of the government. And that ruling, even though it was specific to flag burning, it set a precedent for other forms of symbolic protest, too. Like, the government can't just ban any form of protest it doesn't like.
So where does that leave us with the upside down flag? Is it disrespectful? Is it disruptive? Where's the line?
That's the tricky part, right? And I think that's why this case is causing so much debate. It forces us to think about what's okay in a protest, what's going too far. And it shows us that even something like the American flag, which seems so simple, can mean different things to different people.
It's like this whole thing with Saint Sabina is holding a mirror up to the country, showing us all our divisions and making us ask ourselves some tough questions about who we are and what we believe in.
And those questions, they go beyond just the flag and patriotism. This case also makes us think about the relationship between church and state in America, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Father Pfleger, he's obviously motivated by his faith, but he's also doing something that's very political. So where do you draw a line? When does a church or a religious leader go too far?
Another question that's been debated forever. The First Amendment says we have freedom of religion, but it also says the government can't establish a state religion. It's a balancing act, figuring out how those two ideas work together.
Right, so it's like this constant tension. And I think what makes Father Pfleger's case so interesting is that he's not just speaking out against one specific policy, he's saying the whole country is in a state of emergency. That's a big statement.
It's definitely a bold move, that's for sure. And it might rub some people the wrong way. But it also reflects something we've been seeing more and more lately, where some religious leaders are getting more involved in social and political issues. They're speaking up.
Like they're saying, we can't just sit here and do nothing. Our faith tells us to speak out against injustice, to help those in need, to challenge those in power.
Exactly. And that brings up a question for you, our listener. What do you think the role of religious institutions should be in today's world? Should they stick to spiritual matters? Or should they be engaged with politics and social issues?
And if they are going to be engaged, where do you draw the line? What's appropriate and what's crossing a boundary?
Big questions, important questions, because the answers affect not just churches and religious groups, but our whole democracy.
And you mentioned this idea of prophetic witness earlier. I'm really curious about that. Can you tell us a little more?
Sure, so prophetic witness, it basically means that people, especially those who are deeply moral, have a duty to speak out against injustice, even if it's unpopular, even if it's dangerous.
So it's not just about preaching to the converted. It's about taking a real stand, even if there's a backlash.
Exactly. And Father Pfleger, he's drawing on a long line of religious figures who have been prophetic witnesses, going all the way back to the prophets in the Bible. And in more recent times, you have people like Martin Luther King Jr. speaking out against racial injustice.
It makes you think about how this idea applies not just to religious figures, but to anyone who feels like they need to speak truth to power.
It's a powerful concept, no doubt, especially these days when we're dealing with so many big problems. climate change, political division, economic inequality.
So even if you don't agree with everything Father Pfleger has done, it's important to see him as part of this long tradition of people challenging the status quo, speaking truth to power.
Definitely. And his decision to fly that flag upside down, whether you like it or not, it reminds us that even our most important symbols can be questioned and reinterpreted.
It makes us see that patriotism can have many different faces, and that dissent, even when it's expressed in a way that some people find offensive, is an important part of a healthy democracy.
That's something to think about, for sure.
We've spent a lot of time talking about this upside down flag, what it means, all the different reactions to it, but I keep thinking about what Father Pfleger said about keeping it up there until normalcy returns. What does that even mean? Normalcy.
Yeah, it's a loaded word for sure. What is normal? I mean, it seems so simple, but when you try to define it, it gets really complicated.
Totally. It's totally subjective, right? What's normal to one person might be like total chaos to someone else, or even oppression. So who's normal are we even talking about here?
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this whole thing so messy. There's no one definition of normal. It all depends on who you are, what you believe.
And especially in a country like ours, which is so divided, people have wildly different ideas of what normal looks like.
For sure. Like some people, they might think normal means going back to a time when, their values were more aligned with the mainstream, when things felt more, I don't know, staple.
Yeah, like a simpler time, before all the changes of the last few decades.
Right. But for other people, normal might mean something completely different. It might mean finally seeing real equality, real justice for groups that have been marginalized.
So for them, the normal that some people want to go back to, it's not normal at all. It's actually harmful.
Exactly. It's like they've been fighting against that normal their whole lives. So when Father Pfleger uses that word normalcy, it becomes this flashpoint. It shows that this isn't just about a flag or a protest. It's about what kind of country we want to be.
What our values are, whose stories get told.
Exactly. It's this big debate that's been going on since, well, forever. It's baked into the DNA of America, and it's not going away anytime soon.
It makes you realize that this whole upside down flag thing is really just a small piece of a much bigger puzzle. A puzzle about power, representation, who gets it to decide what's right and wrong.
It's a reminder that the fight for justice, for equality, it never really ends. It's not like you reach a finish line and everything's perfect. It's this constant back and forth.
And this thing at St. Sabina, whether you agree with it or not, it's forced us to look at those different viewpoints, those different visions for the future. It's made us talk about what patriotism means, what the role of religion should be, what normalcy even is.
And even though there might not be any easy answers, the fact that we're having this conversation at all, that's a good thing, right? That's what a healthy democracy looks like.
It shows that we're willing to question things and disagree, to grapple with stuff that's uncomfortable. That's important.
It is. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage you and our listener to keep thinking about these issues. Don't be afraid to have those tough conversations. Talk to people who see things differently than you do. Really listen to them. Try to understand where they're coming from.
Because it's through those conversations, even when they're hard, that we can start to find common ground. And maybe, just maybe, we can start to build a better future for everyone.
And maybe along the way we'll realize that our own idea of what's normal has changed too.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.